And we are live with our 112th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode, or welcome to another episode of Absolute AppSec. We're excited to have a longtime colleague and friend on the show with us this week, Mark Feferman. We'll get into his introductions here shortly. But as far as announcements go for this week, we do have the Black Hat Next Level Bug Hunting Code Edition course that is available for Black Hat Europe. We will post the link, or we have a few times. It's going around on Twitter and other places. Black Hat's been promoting it. But if you're interested in secure code review, how to conduct a secure code review, the process that Ken and I take to do a manual code review, because we're going to be talking about, automated analysis here shortly. But that would be the opportunity that you've got to sign up. We'd love to have you. And otherwise, I think Ken sent out some swag this week. Maybe. I don't know.
Crap. Oh, man.
He was all on top of it last week when we spoke, and then this week.
I know.
Right. But that's okay. We'll get there. I'll keep bothering him. And yeah, I don't think there's much else that I've got to announce this week. Right. Like InfoSec Twitter is still kind of a dumpster fire with, politics and the election coming up. So yeah, there's been some research that's popped up that could be interesting, but I think we want to talk to Mark more this week. So Ken, is there anything else that you have?
No, sir. I figured I'd just introduce Mark and get into it.
Okay.
Cool. So Seth and I worked with Mark at Fishnet, formerly Fishnet Security, and now Optiv. Mark was I want to call you Fef. I keep wanting to call you. You've got Fef on there anyway. So yeah, all right. So I'm gonna call you Fef. All right. So Fef was our manager of the practice. This was, God, what year was that? Was it like 2010 or 22? I don't know. I don't remember.
It was about
2010.
Right?
Yeah, it was 2010.
Okay. Yeah. So we worked together for a bit, and we have a lot of respect for Mark. And Mark is currently at Checkmarks. And also before I go into that, Mark actually Fef lives in do you still live in Texas?
I do. I live in Houston.
Okay. All right. I thought so, but I wasn't sure if you had moved. So, because like whenever, you are moving.
Well, just to another place. Yeah. Moving physically, but I'll still be in part of Houston.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, so like why I brought that up was I've noticed that you've tapped into the especially like the Austin sort of Texas AppSec LastCon sort of community, and I think most of the time when we were going to LastCon previously, I would see you there, and it's always nice to catch up. And but anyways, yeah, so you're at Checkmarks now. What did I say? Checkmarks. I'm all tongue-tied today. Sorry guys, I'm super tired. So we figured have Fef on. Let's talk about SAST or SCA. But before we get into that, I definitely do want to hear a little bit about Fef's background. Sorry, so were you going to say, Seth?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because Fef's got a really interesting background in the security space on the development side and product side of things that I wanted to dive in a little bit before we get into what he did after Fishnet. Which was more kind of the SCA space. So, Mark, if you don't mind, kind of like welcome to the show, and give us a quick background on kind of where you grew up, as far as professionally, I should say, and then we'll dive into SCA from there, or SAST or whatever.
Well, hey, I'm great to be here. Thank you for having me. Wow, so AppSec, it's interesting space to be. I have to say I'm extremely lucky to be in this space given the current state of the world, and so it's still going strong. Apparently criminals don't give up when there's a pandemic. So my history is kind of interesting, and I will absolutely start off by saying that I've been very lucky most of my career. I got my degree in computer science at UT in Austin. Didn't have any prospects. Ended up doing a spray and pray of resumes with maybe some tainted truth in there, and ended up getting picked up by this small startup in Houston called the LAN Support Group. I was one of 4 software developers. There were 14 of us at the company. We had a product that was DOS based because Windows wasn't quite out yet, at least not really in mainstream. And we wrote a product called BindView. So for any folks that have been in this space for a really long time, or I should say the IT space and sort of somewhat security, we changed our name to BindView, and BindView became a company. So fast forward 7 years at BindView, we grew to 750 people, and we did an IPO in 1998, a $1 billion market cap on the NASDAQ. So that was incredibly lucky for me, first job out of the gate. And I learned a tremendous amount about, something that's super applicable to my job today, which is really software development and really everything about that, right? The whole life cycle. From there, I wrote some software for Enron and was a big software developer still. But the pivotal point for me to get into AppSec was I got called by an oil and gas firm to run their BindView instance. They had paid a couple $1 million for it. And so I did that. And essentially they had a white hat hacker report something. And I would happen to be a very technical member of their security team and didn't really know anything about hacking at that point. I think OWASP must have been very new at that point. And I just had happened to get my CISSP at the end of 2004 just on a whim. And so I looked at that issue that was brought up at the oil and gas firm, and that was really my entrance into AppSec. It was a SQL injection attack. And sure enough, I went back in the web logs and found that someone in the Netherlands had downloaded the database a couple of years before. And that was it. So, if we talk about so I did that for a few years. Definitely, we brought in, I'll say this, we brought in 2 very early vendors. One was a company called Fortify, and they had a startup SaaS product called Fortify SCA. And the other one we had was a company that was called Spy Dynamics, and they had a DAS product called Web Inspect. I know you guys know them both. So that was really the beginning. That was around 2004, 2005. And then you guys know the rest, really. I left that place and met this wonderful super mentor of mine, Joey Peliquin, who brought me in as sort of an SDLC guy for Fishnet and for his practice. I was actually, team members with you guys. And so that was really my big chance to get into pure AppSec, and I've never looked back. And I really owe a lot of that to Joey. And frankly, all of the information that I learned at Fishnet is probably the deepest and most relevant I have in this space. And it really came from, frankly, like guys like you two. As a matter of fact, I was not a pen tester previously, and you guys showed me things I didn't even know. Didn't even know was possible. So, there's obviously many other names we could talk about.
Joey brought me in. He's the reason I was able to get off of DoD. Seth interviewed me, so I guess Seth and Joey, I would say the same, because I was working on DoD government contracting, and which sucked, and just frankly it stunk. And so same deal, Joey. We should talk to Joey at some point. It's been a couple of years since I've seen him in person, or at least a few years. So
amazing guy. I really owe him a tremendous amount. And look, it's funny if we can certainly talk about how I became your manager, but if you guys don't know the story, and I'm pretty sure you do, because I know at least Seth, you were talked to before I was talked to. It was one of those conversations when Joey called me and said, "Hey, do you want to be the practice manager for the AppSec team?" I'm like, "Gosh, yeah, of course I do." And he goes, "Well, I just want to let you know that you're number 5 on the list. Everybody else turned it down."
That's hilarious.
So
that's funny.
So I took it, and that was that. So, but yeah, I really learned a lot from you guys.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, Joey was he's a really good people person and technical resource as well. I mean, I think you're right, Ken. At some point, we should have Joey on just to see where he's at, what's going on, and in his space. I know he's bounced around a little bit since Fishnet as well. Like was at F5 for a number of years, and has been in and out of a couple different places. But like all of us, right? I think it's it was a really good team that we had there as Joey was in charge, and like there was. I mean, I'm trying to remember how big it was. It was probably about 20 of us, I believe, right?
That's exactly right. There were 20. I had 21 direct reports when he handed that over, and I was at a level that was really, frankly, below all the consultants in capability, but it was really just a pure management job.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, with that many direct reports, trying to get schedules and everything going, there's not, it's hard to stay technical at that point. And I think that was a lot of the reason that the others that were up for that job, right. Fergie and the others were less than excited about it because it would have pushed them out of the technical space. But
Joey, he had also something, remember it was something crazy, like 90% travel. Plus he was billable a fraction of the time doing technical stuff. Then he had all the management of all these direct reports. And I think it was the cumulative effect of the stress of that job and the amount of work that you have to do, as well as frankly, there was internal stuff too, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, but that job is so hard to 90% travel is like, I'm glad I don't have to do that. I mean, I can't imagine what that does to your body and like your psyche for an extended period of time.
Probably less than that is the effects potentially on your family.
Right.
Probably one of the reasons why I got divorced was that. And it was tough for sure.
Pushing somebody so that you're constantly, because even when you're home, like, were you ever fully energized?
Of course not. And you come home and you're trying to be around two young kids and your wife and trying to fit right back into that role. Meanwhile, you've got the stress of a lot of folks delivering work. And anyway, it was stressful for sure. I was in management for about 10 years since that job, and I just got out of that. And it is maybe the best thing I've done for my stress level and
health.
And health and feeling more relevant, really. I mean, not that there's not relevance in being management. I mean, it's critical, right? But I'm a technical guy, so it was, yeah.
Yeah, that's hard, right? Like coming from a development background and then being pushed, or stepping into that management role where it's a completely different skill set, right? Like I'm impressed that you made it 10 years in that role, right? Like this has been a discussion, recently, like running my own little consulting firm has been, hey, do we really want to grow, right? Like how big do we want to be? And like that's always been the discussion is where is that line where it becomes more management work than it is actual technical work? Because I know for me, a lot of the clients that I have are because it's me, right? Like I'm selling myself is really what
Absolutely.
It boils down to. And the second that I start to hand off all my projects to somebody else or like get somebody else technical in there, it's like, okay, while they are qualified and they've been vetted, it's still
the customers feel like it's bait and switch.
Yeah, they do. And I know we had that issue at like every large consulting firm has that, right? They bring in their heavy hitters to sell those big contracts.
Right.
And then that's what the E&Y model or like the big, a big accounting firm model.
So I really have a lot of things to say about UI. Some are good, some are not good, but you're right. And I will say this though, at Fishnet, that was a different place. And I'll say it like this. My team, the team that I was part of, you guys were all so capable. There was really never a case of bait and switch because you guys were all, and I totally credit Joey for bringing that entire team together. He built the team. I just took over a well-oiled machine.
Yeah. I mean, if you go through the names there, besides all of us, there was Justin Engler, who
Nathan
went to
Hamill.
Nathan Hamill.
Greg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greg Fleischer, holy geez.
Right. That's actually who I was trying to remember. Yeah. My gosh. Like, because like the four of you did a Black Hat talk together, building a
That's right.
Raft
automated
tool.
testing suite
right.
for iOS. I think it was.
Yeah, that was me, Devo, Justin, and then Dubik as well, right?
All right, Josh.
All right.
Yeah, and
We
that
had a
that one
ridiculous
was,
team.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it
that
was
was good.
great.
And then the previous year was that with the talk on Raft with Greg and Nathan and Justin and me too, right? Like, so it's like there was quite a bit of interesting research going on. Like, it was very cutting edge. It was fun, right? But it was a lot of stress for sure too, right? Like there was a constant grind, and they were big enough that there was big names coming through as far as companies go, and testing, and trying to push some of those projects out took a lot of extra effort, right? So,
well, it's interesting to hear you. I certainly have followed you guys a little bit in your quest to, and I mean, I'm not really a quest, but your quest to sort of talk about SaaS, but your methodology about doing your assessments and stuff. And I unfortunately haven't been able to watch one of those. I'm actually very interested to see how you guys do that. But if you remember, you guys were doing, and I think you were on that. Ken was the big box provider that's in Bentonville, right?
Yeah. That was my start. So to back up on that one. Did InDoc. By the way, I immediately loved Fishnet joining, and for the first couple of years, it was amazing. But anyways, so that was the first thing we did. They flew us there. We sat in a room together. We never went on site. Then we had to fly home on the weekends, then come back on Monday, sit in the room together again for another week. Never went on site, never saw the customer, only saw each other. And that's what we did was SCA, right? Or SAST. Yeah, basically run a scanner. And
in fact, you guys mentioned this. I think you guys mentioned something similar in your 110 episode, where you talked about doing SaaS, but also validating that they were exploitable vulnerabilities by following up with sort of a DAST assessment, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that's that hybrid assessment for validation was, I mean, to me, was a huge selling point and really makes it valid.
Yeah.
So
it's just not the dynamic side wasn't super automated though. That was more of just like a manual.
Right.
But yeah, it is the same. Exactly. It's like a dynamic validation of what we thought we found in the code, but sometimes it wasn't always possible, depending on.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a good project, it was an interesting project. I learned a lot. We'll say that.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of what we teach, like the secure code review stuff that we do, right, stems from the time that we spent, 10 years ago in a room trying to figure out how we were going to look at this code,
How are you going to get through 1,500 apps in a year?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, using the automated tools that were available at the time. And we talk a lot about this was like that initial assessment, they expected basically a manual code review out of the SaaS tools. And then this can kind of dovetail into what you've been doing the last few years there, Fef. But
they had it backwards.
Yeah, they really did, right? Like it was, they would go and scan a code base, dump, 15 to 20,000 findings in our lap. And then like all we did for a week or 2 weeks was review those findings, eliminate the false positives. And they're like, okay, code review done. And we're like, wait a second, right? Like we've done something, but it isn't what you think it is. And this is, and I don't know, I was thinking about it as we were going to have you on. This is kind of the disconnect that we have in the industry is, so the static code analysis tools, or the SaaS tools have been like, I mean, back in, 2008, 2007, right? Like it was Fortify was blowing up and, AppScan Source or, Ounce Labs at the time, right? As they were taking off, they were sold as this silver bullet, right? So there's still quite a few companies that look at static analysis tools as, hey, well, if I scan the code, I'm good, right? I don't like, yeah, there's great that I do these other things and I've got protections and WAFs in place and all of this. But as long as I've looked at the code, it means that I've caught the majority of whatever vulnerabilities are out there. At least that's the impression that I get talking to a lot of, medium
I know. I
to
think you're
small-sized
absolutely right.
businesses. So
You're right. You're definitely right about that. And I think, of course, that you guys know, right? It's just one component in, everybody some people call it the security onion, or, it's just another level of testing, right? And it depends, where you want to do that type of testing in your life cycle of development. I do think it's very relevant, for sure. But then again, so do I. I think that the manual pen testing that I know you guys are super capable at doing is, every bit as important, if not more. I mean, right? You can find usefully exploitable vulnerabilities that way, whereas in SaaS, right, you can find tons of vulnerabilities that could never be exploited.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, it's those two. It's kind of those different approaches, right? Like we talk about applying security across the SDLC, and there's a place for SaaS, there's a place for manual, there's a place for DAST, there's a place for
everything.
Training, everything,
threat modeling.
Yeah. It all fits. The second that we drop one of those, we start to have problems. Okay. So that's SaaS, but let's talk about your career after Fishnet, right? Like, I think from there you went to, was it Fortify at the time, or was it HP, or
it was HP? So I left. I left Fishnet. I wouldn't say not on my own accord, but it got really frictiony there. If you remember who came in as the VP at that time and took over Aaron's job, and he kind of ran a few people off. I was one of those where we just couldn't get along no matter what. He just wanted to show upper management that he had some ability to whatever. So I ended up getting brought over by an old sort of a friend, a sales guy from the Fortify days, the early Fortify days, who brought me over to HP to work for the Fortify group. And in fact, I ran, just like at Fishnet, I basically ran the professional services for Fortify. I did that for the East Coast. And it was great for a little while. But what I didn't know was that HP and well, of course now Micro Focus, although maybe changing a little bit, they weren't, they paid a lot of money for this product. They didn't put any effort into working on it for a number of years, and they were trying to get money back out of it. I mean, the numbers I heard were really astronomical for the purchase of Fortify versus the purchase of Pounce by IBM. IBM was just a much better negotiator for acquiring companies, apparently. And so it was pretty tough at HP, actually. There was what I didn't know when I came in was that there was a whole other team that was focused on building this product called Fortify on Demand. I don't know if you guys know about that.
Yep. Yeah.
And so what would end up happening is we would go in on site. I traveled 100% at that time. I think I did 120,000 miles a year for HP. Only domestically. That was never any international flight, only in domestic.
Wow, that means you traveled a lot, because to get over 100,000 miles, man, the easiest way to do it is to do a bunch of international trips. When you do domestic like that, that has got, I mean, I can't even imagine how many flights you were on to hit that number, because what's the most you can do? I mean, right?
It was brutal. It was brutal. Yeah. I will say this, it's one of those things where you get to become the 1K guy on United, and you're flying first class everywhere, and it's kind of a toss up. Well, I love this first class and I've got to do it because I'm in my job, but wow, this has ruined my life, kind of thing.
Yeah. You have a nicer seat, but
right.
Problems when you come home. So
exactly.
Yeah.
But so I did that for a while. But what was interesting was, and it kind of when you have a large company, and there's an interesting article about HP in Forbes that was a few years ago called, you look it up, How HP Lost Its Way. What was interesting is we would go in and visit a customer or a prospect, sell them on it, do the whole dog and pony show. They would be pumped about it. And then the next day, because the Fortify on Demand team had all of our meetings that we had lined up because of the public calendar, they just go and call up the customer and say, hey, you don't need to install all that difficult software. You can just use our solution. So there was competing within the business unit for business, and it caused a whole lot of animosity, and it really turned really negative, to say the least. So that actually went pretty poorly for 2.5 years. I mean, it was a great experience. And I will say that the salary from Fishnet to HP was amazing. But at the end, it probably was another contributor to some bad, relationship happenings. And so, I guess after that, I went off on my own. So I tried to do what Seth is doing now. And I wasn't the kind of tester that you guys were from a dynamic perspective. So that was never in my docket of offerings. However, I did spend quite a bit of time just doing, well, at that time, of course, Fortify was my baby. So Fortify consulting for some of my old clients. And that worked out great. And then I ended up getting offered a gig in Australia. And so I moved to Australia for 3 months. Fantastic country. Love that place. Would absolutely live there if I could. First, I went to the capital. Does anybody know the capital of Australia? Not a lot of
Melbourne.
people. Nope.
Sydney.
Nope. Right. It's Perth. Right in the middle. It's right Perth. In the middle, and they did that on purpose. Nope. It's called Canberra.
Yes.
Canberra. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you go there, they literally built it because they couldn't decide. I've been told they couldn't decide on Melbourne or Sydney, so they built something in between. But it's a great little college town. It's kind of like Austin. There's a big university there, smaller. You guys would love it. So I did a lot of work there for the ATO, which is the Australian Tax Office, and we were doing ABOP, static analysis with Fortify, one of the few tools that could do that. I came back for a couple weeks to the US to see my kids, and then I moved back to Sydney, and I worked for Westpac Bank, and did the same thing there. And that was great for a little while, but that's really when my marriage took, of course, a turn for the worse. And so while that was happening, I was offered a gig with EY, and I joined EY. So I probably don't want to say too much about them. I will say that there are some very capable people at EY in the testing side of things, meaning what you guys do. Not so much static, although they do some static, but mostly dynamic testing or network penetration stuff. There's some really good, I think they used to be called the ACE team at EY, but very capable guys and girls, actually, women and men.
Well, I mean, actually, let's talk about that for a second, because, it's actually pretty interesting. I think that SAST, or not, sorry, I don't know why I'm saying SAST. It doesn't matter if you're using a tool or manual or whatever. Software, what am I trying to say? Static analysis, period, was not much of a thing in the consulting world. It was like a much smaller percentage. Most people just wanted to give you a URL and some creds and maybe a couple accounts and just let you go on your way and do that every 6 months to check whatever box they're checking. And that was the majority of testing. And I would say it was reversed when Seth and I were at the, Seth can speak more to what he's experienced over the last 3 years. But prior to that, working at the old place, we shall not mention, there was pretty decent amount of static analysis testing done, I would say. So it's, I guess what I'm trying to say is that has definitely shifted in my opinion and in my experience. I don't know what you all see. I don't know if that jives or lines up with what you're saying or what you're seeing rather.
Do you want to start off, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you I still feel like static analysis, right, with an automated and manual component to it is a specialty offering, right? I work with a lot of larger consulting firms that don't even have anybody on staff that'll look at code.
Right.
They will all day long. They can find dynamic testers, right? And with some of the collegiate programs that are out there cranking out CTFs and everything else along with that, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of pure coders in the space still that have the chops to do that, right? It's just like, I know the place that shall not be named, we always pushed for it, but it was partially because you and I were on board, Ken, right? Like, as we were building out that team, we always ask for code.
Right.
And a lot of the startups and companies that I get in, personally come because we're looking at code. So that's what I'm seeing. And most of the time I get stuff through partners. They don't even include code in the in the statements of work or even in the proposals to people, right?
Right.
So it's harder for me to get it when it's going through a partner. If I'm going direct to the organization, most of them are like, oh, you want to look at the code? Sure, right? Like, yeah, that makes sense. But
didn't even think about that.
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, really? It's all built on code, but yeah,
Right.
whatever. So I don't know. I mean, Fef, what are you seeing?
So, it's interesting. I definitely remember at our Fishnet days, static analysis was, few and far between compared to the dynamic work that you guys were doing. And really, frankly, that's why Joey brought me in, was to try and, I think, build that effort a little bit more from an SDLC perspective. So along those lines, I still don't see, it's hard to do the whole, hey, we want you to do a pen test. As you said, Ken, here's a URL and some creds, right? Static analysis takes a lot more prep than that. And there's obviously, it's their intellectual capital. So, hey, where are you going to have this code?
Yeah, some people make you come on site and use their laptops. I've definitely done a mobile assessment, actually more than one mobile assessment on site with a customer laptop in their own little room, which, by the way,
absolutely
is fucking ridiculous. If it's a mobile app, just consider it reversible. Like,
right.
But anyways, yeah, sorry.
But no, you're right.
It's
small. And I see that all the time also, Ken, where when we were at EY, we'd have some one-off consult. Actually, it wasn't even one-off. So I don't know if you guys know this, but EY bought AppSec Security, right? So AppSec Security and Contrast split off so that Contrast could be separate.
Yeah.
And then EY went in and bought the AppSec, or the AppSec group. And what was funny about that is, for some reason, they thought that the culture was going to work out for all those guys at AppSec, like you guys. And literally, it was like the paper, that the signature was still wet and people were leaving. Like, they just couldn't take the culture there.
I know you can't say much, but does it have to do does it have to do with the hours? Because I've heard that EY has a very sharp people, but that is like a what you would imagine, like a Wall Street shark sort of firm, where everybody's like killing themselves to climb the ladder and ultra competitive. That's just tangentially sort of, stuff that I've heard.
So it is, you are absolutely, so here's how it works. The big four in general are 100% body shops, right? They don't sell technology. They're not resellers. It's 100% consulting. So their goals are to sell multi-year, multi-body engagements, right? If you stick 50 people on an engagement for 3 years at $110 an hour per person, it's a lot of money.
It is.
And $110 would be a blended rate. So you've got some partners that are $400 an hour, and you've got some low-level guys maybe that are a lot less than that. But numbers is the name of the game there, right? I mean, obviously, they all started off as kind of accounting firms. So when they started doing advisory services, they are extremely diligent about making sure they get as much blood and sweat out of every resource they have to get every dollar. And in fact, to get promoted there is 100% about sales. You can't become a partner or a principal or whatever unless you can maintain a book of business on your own. And that's a long road. I know people that tried for 5 years that became senior managers and just never got the promotion. And so it's difficult for sure. It's a lot of hours. I would never recommend anyone walking in unless you were young at a position where you're actually going to be doing the work. Now, I did see people come in as partners, but they were older guys that had an established book of business. I was an older guy. I didn't have the established book of business that I could walk in with and say, here's $5 million I'm going to bring in every year.
Right.
It's a very political and who you know and
so you're a consultant and a salesperson. Interesting, huh?
Well,
that seems like
there.
No,
yeah.
I'm not saying you. I'm just saying
yeah.
I that seems like a real bad conflict of interest, because now you're incentivized to put into place hours and efforts and products that are not necessarily what the customer might need or get value out of. So it does seem like a huge conflict of interest.
I would say that's more, and yes, I think that was, so I saw that a lot. And that was one of the things that really rubbed me wrong. And I would be sitting in meetings with a customer and my boss, and they'd have these strategic talks about how they were going to do certain security things, and my boss would literally at the sweep of a pen and say, and we just do this and this and this, and then you're good. And I'd look at him and I'd look at the customer and I'd say, hey, you do realize that that's like a year's worth of work. That's not an instant thing. And by the way, half of that's not going to be valid for anyway. So there is, you're right, it is kind of a conflict of interest. I think that a lot of people are sold stuff that they don't really understand. But that's not across the board, right? I think that that's not, I wouldn't say that's descriptive of the big four at all.
Well, anytime you deal with a large company, you can't blanket statement anything,
Right. I mean, I know some very, very talented folks there that are on the same side of the business you're in, that sit in a room all day long, they pen test, that sort of stuff. I was on the side of the practice where we built AppSec programs for companies. So
that's awesome.
But you know how hard that is, because the hard part is if you don't have the resources internally at the company, then you're expecting your consultant teams like me to bring in these resources. And well, you guys know how easy it is to find AppSec resources.
Oh my God, it's almost impossible. I mean, it's
right.
This is actually just real quick. I'm working with a couple people to sort of build their skill set from being like an IT background with like security hobbyist knowledge and what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to help them take all of that into AppSec, because it's like, and somebody asked me why, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, we have a huge shortage in this industry, and like, none of us are getting younger on this call. We need the next wave to come in and be effective and do the right thing, and not go to like customers and try to sell them stuff they don't need, and
that's correct,
miss big findings, and cause the world to have more insecure software. Like, we really do need. Anyways, not to get off on that tangent.
No, but you're right. And so what I frequently saw is that we couldn't put our best foot forward. Meanwhile, we were charging the customer millions of dollars a year for something that I felt was going to be ineffective. Again, that was my particular experience. I definitely spent a lot of time as a manager training people on how to do very basic stuff, because like you said, they just didn't have that experience. So between flying around and that, it wasn't a great experience for me. What I would say is that the big four are great companies for people to go to right out of school. The experience you can get is fantastic from a business sense. You're exposed to some of the biggest companies in the world because they trust these folks. And there is a lot of good work done. I mean, I can say that my same team that I didn't have a great experience with on one client, I got to be part of another team kind of in the same practice and go manage something in Florida for some big boat companies. And they did some amazing work there, truly amazing, just expensive. I'm kind of cheap like that. So, well, let's just talk about, go ahead, Seth.
Yeah. So that was the question. I like what started this all was the question about static analysis and what you were seeing.
Right. I only see it in big stuff. Right. I only see it in big programs. I don't see it as one-off. So
yeah. And that's the interesting thing, right? Like, so Ken's talking about large organizations, like really concerned about their code. Hey, we have to go on site. Most of the people that have come to me recently that want static analysis are startups, right? That are very, very hyper aware of what it's like to be online and security. Like, they're taking security seriously. So they're looking for actual static analysis, both from a dynamic perspective and a manual perspective, right? Like, or an automated and a manual perspective. So they're rolling out, software composition analysis tools, other SEA tools. They've got, they'll be looking at check marks. They're looking at, Fortify or CodeQL or, other options that are out there to implement in their DevOps or the DevSecOps pipeline. And so, like, that's where I see the wave coming is startups. I know that PCI drove a lot of that initially because of, 6.6. Hey, you've got to at least scan your code or, do a pen test or dynamic assessment. But that seems to die off for me personally, as opposed to these startups. So.
I think depending on the size of the organization, it's still a very relevant and sought after skill set, or that they want to do static. A lot of companies do. I think that a lot of companies are misled by vendors about how to do some of that stuff as opposed to stuff that works in practice. And I think for a lot of people, they kind of spin their wheels, and it's expensive to do that with. So, I definitely think that, and the other part of that is that you're right. It's they bring it in after the fact, right? It's not being done. It hadn't been done for a long time. I had a very big, probably my biggest client was a big industrial machine maker in Illinois. They make big yellow machines, and they had some very sharp guys there and very smart people there, but they just didn't. They couldn't get out of their own way to be effective, and political stuff. And I don't know. Static is a really different. There's such a difference between static and dynamic, not just, of course, in the understanding of what they do, but again, it's you're playing with somebody's intellectual capital. Some people are afraid. They don't want to talk about the cloud and their code up there. I think there's a general misunderstanding about potential security capabilities in the cloud. Everyone thinks it's like open, like the wild, wild west. But yeah, static is difficult. I still don't see it being, and I mean, I know you do a lot of that, you guys. I think that you've dug a niche for yourself though, and you're so well respected in the SaaS space. I still think I just feel like we still aren't there yet. I think, and I said that 10 years ago when I worked with you guys, or longer than that.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, I appreciate your kind words. So on the note of big companies buying products, not sure what to do in static analysis, one thing that I have experienced and have seen, and I know Seth has as well, because we've had we do the course together, and we've had students come up and ask this question, and we've definitely talked about it on the podcast before, which is like, hey, my company wants to scan every code base that we have. That equals 2,000 code bases a year. I've got a team of about 4 or 5 people, but I'm a manager, so I'm not, necessarily doing technical hands-on stuff. So how are we supposed to apply your methodology at that rate of review that we're doing? Mm-hmm. And the answer is almost always you're not, right? You're not going to do all of your code base. You're not going to scan all of your code bases and then do a review of that. This is the silliest part of how this all, and if we go back in history of the short history of how this has all evolved, I think the idea was in static analysis to quickly find flaws, period. Just run through the code base and look for issues. What it turned into was, here's a product that's going to be your silver bullet. You're going to hook up all your apps to it. It's going to, hey, we're even continuous deployment ready, since someone took a half hour to write a CI/CD plugin. So boom, we're shifting left. And now we're in a place where people just are trying to just scan, get the results. Okay, boom, no new issues, or there are new issues, triage, and that's how we're going to do it. Realistically, even if you do nothing else with our methodology, and our methodology is built on practical, real world, we do this professionally. This is just the best way that we found to do it together. And in that methodology, even if you don't follow anything, you still have to at least get the context of what you're reviewing results on. So you need to know about the technology, the behavior, what the application's built upon, who it's supplying all this information to, is it internal, external users. So you're creating a whole profile before you even perform the scan. You should be, right? But again, even that is time consuming enough that, it's not that time consuming, but it's time consuming enough. And with, again, being realistic, you're not going to get through 2,000 apps in a year with 4 or 5 people. So what we always try to tell people is just prioritize. That's where I think the value of, we've seen a lot of discussions, and I'm a part of a lot of discussions with other companies as well, which is about self-service risk assessments and allowing engineering managers or project managers or senior developers on the project, team leads, whatever it is, to go in, fill out a set of questions to meet compliance, legal, trade, AppSec, SecOps, all that stuff, all those requirements, go through that self-service risk assessment. So then you can prioritize. There's a company that we all use their open source apps. We all know their security team members. They speak at all the conferences. They have all the most interesting stuff. And I can tell you right now, those folks are doing exactly that. They're prioritizing what apps make sense and what are the riskiest ones. And I think that that's the approach that's correct, is somewhere meeting in the middle. But for some reason, we got to this point where we said, okay, we have a tool. It's a magic silver bullet. You can just install it, no problem, which is like, dude, we do this for a living. That shit's hard to run. You're going to hand it to like a team that has no clue about this tool, and they're just going to run the scan. And I mean, so we got ourselves into this mess. And it's like, as an industry, I honestly wish we would just take a step back and be like, this isn't the right way. Like, let's talk about the right way.
I think though, I don't think everybody's like that, though. I think, so I will say this, at EY, we were absolutely 100% because everything's about risk. That was our number one thing was, hey, where's your CMDB of applications that are already ranked by risk and importance to the business? Because that's where we're going to start. And frankly, nobody
has that. No,
right. I mean, they
don't even know what applications they have. But that's app inventory. That's yeah.
Right. That's why Jeremiah is doing the whole Bitdefender stuff, right? I mean, it's defined
right.
Important. And there's other companies that do it, but definitely risk-based approach. I 100% agree with you. Is that I do feel like there's a difference. There's those two different camps, right? There are the people that you're talking about, Ken, that are just kind of here's our bucket of apps. Let's just start scanning them. I definitely also see people that are a little bit more strategic than that, and not so much risk-based approach. But when you talk about building a program, and at least the way I talk about it at Checkmarks, is we don't really even advocate developers to do the scanning. You know, they're busy writing code. And when you talk about a CI/CD plugin, yeah, that is a way that people do scanning. That's a very common way. But even the newer way, right, is via webhooks. You don't even bother with CI/CD solutions. You have a developer that does a pull request, boom, it fires off a scan, unbeknownst to them. Scan happens, and then you have the AppSec team that's looking at the results totally asynchronously, and they're pushing defects into that developer's regular work item list or whatever. And it's just another item that they're going through as they're writing code. So that approach works to me a little bit. I think the difficult part is getting all of that automated. And as you guys know, and from our history, right, you never push static results directly into a defect tracking system from the tool. Yeah. But there are ways to actually do that appropriately. And it's something I want to talk to you guys about, but we're running a little low on time. But it's the whole onboarding process, right? It's the baseline scan and getting rid of all the false positives that you can, or maybe all of them. And then you can kind of put it in a set it and forget it mode to a certain extent.
GitHub does that. GitHub does what you just described. We do that. So a
and so
PR is submitted to master. And we have an automated tool. And to your point of there are ways, I'll just give you one way. Only annotate and comment on. So we have the tool when it runs, it has like a bot that comments and says, this is what seems dangerous, and it CCs our team. And so that's super helpful, but also it's only doing that on high confidence. Like we feel, and otherwise anything else is not going to be surfaced to you as a developer and to us as the team who needs to go kind of
I get those emails frequently from Dependabot, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, like vulnerable dependencies. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Awesome stuff. Really great stuff. Love that. So our approach, of course, is a little bit more, I say, brute forcey in terms of, you've got to do the onboarding. We used to talk about onboarding at Fortify, and that was really creating a placeholder in the tool for the app. But onboarding at Checkmarks is a lot different. It is that, but it's also the baseline scan. But we have this product, and I know almost nobody knows about it, and it's really a shame. And it's the biggest part of Checkmarks, which is this component called CX Audit. I don't know if you guys know about that, but if you remember at Fortify, right? If you had to write custom rules for Fortify, it was an XML file with regular expressions within it, and it was a real pain in the ass to write.
Yeah.
Checkmarks spent a ton of time writing an entire ecosystem around their what they call their query language, right? Which is CXQL. And they have an IDE that does compilation and actual compiling of their security rules. It looks just like you're writing C#. It's 100% list based. It's very readable, and it is incredibly powerful. And maybe for another show, I can bring on a guy that will just wow the hell out of you. I can do a little bit, but I'm not great at it. It's learning. It's difficult. I mean, it's not difficult, but it can be difficult.
I would love that. Honestly, I would love that. I got a walkthrough once with you had mentioned before the show the Semel team. They gave a walkthrough of how to like write queries and stuff like that, and that was like incredibly helpful in a short period of time. So I think our viewers would appreciate a walkthrough and a run through of that. That'd be amazing.
I mean, it's amazing to me. And we just don't talk about it enough. And one of the challenges is, you talk about vendors and people only focus on out of the box. And I get the out of the box thing, but you know what? There's this whole other capability that can make this tool like so relevant to your code base, and people don't even want to talk about that. But yeah, I would love to show that to you guys at some point. We can plan something in the future.
Yeah, no, that'd be great, right? Like anything that, well, and that's what I was gonna say, Mark. Right, is a lot of what where I see SAST and static analysis tools is effective is when the company actually takes the time to implement them properly, right? Exactly what you're saying, right?
Right.
They onboard, they either look at the false positives or they create a baseline, and then they do everything above that. And, it's more than just, hey, I'm going to throw something at, Fortify on demand, and then I'm going to get really good results out of that. So I don't have to, and then I can just move on.
Elevate it to this. It's like you guys, right? I can say all day long, oh, this web inspect tool or this automated DAS tool is fantastic. Oh, great. But the reality is, you know what? Your manual dynamic tests are way better. And it's kind of the same thing. Sure, I've got this automated DAS tool, but if you do this effort, it'll make it way better. And it is amazing, the stuff. I mean, anyway, I think it's something that's super relevant. The other thing that's really kind of neat is we've had some tools come out of the PS group that just happen to be so great and well adopted that we've productized it a certain amount. In fact, one of them is open source. It's one of our biggest components now. It's called CX Flow. Mm-hmm. And you can certainly look at that. It's on GitHub. And if you look at the wiki, you can see how it works. But that's really one of the main components I was talking about that can automate everything, which is, you essentially hook it up to pick your SCM that has webhooks we support, and it listens for these events, like you said. So we've got this, it's a Spring Boot app. It listens for webhooks. You've got certain configurations in the YAML file for the app so that, you can give it some specifics about how you want it to operate. But it will literally scan based on a PR request, as well as even push results to your ticketing system. So I can push stuff to GitHub, to GitLab, to Bitbucket, to Azure, DevOps. And if you go through the onboarding, as I mentioned, I keep talking about that. If you put in the effort for that, you can really set it and forget it. But you've got to have the people to support it, right? I mean, we've talked about this also, right? The people, process, technology. You can't just have one or two. You've got to really have all. So even if I've got a tool and I've got it set up right and whatever, if I don't have the right people looking at it, the people part, then it may not be successful either, right? That's why experts like you guys come into play. So, well,
and I'm looking at the, it's interesting. I posted links to both the flow that's mentioned, which is, it's what you would expect, right? There's a webhook event that fires, it looks like, and that's triggered by a push event, and then just sort of like, however you've configured and written extensions for CX scanner. Is it CX? Yeah. Actually, that's my question. Is CX scanner same as CX Audit?
So there's a couple of different. You might be looking at an old repo. I didn't see the link that you put up there, quickly, but that's okay. If you're in your search engine, if you just search for like check marks and CX Flow and then LTD for limited, that'll be the correct repo. And then if you click on the wiki part at the top of GitHub for that repo, it'll give you a really good write-up of how to use CX Flow and its use cases and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. And I didn't see that. You might have put that link. That might have been the one you put that was correct. I just didn't see it. It flashed for a little bit, and I didn't really pay attention to it. But
oh yeah, don't worry. You got better things. You're on a podcast.
Yeah, and I know Fef that you need to go here in a minute, but I did want to call this out, like what you said about people, right? Like I know it came up previously as far as like having the right people on board, and the right people that these results go to. That's always kind of the hard play, right? Like I'll walk into organizations that have already paid and installed like checkmarks or Fortify or AppScan source, and they're like, yeah, we're just going to throw it away. And I'm like,
right.
But why? And they're like, well, we gave it to our engineers and they couldn't make heads or tail of it. And it's just a whole bunch of work. And I'm like, okay, but like you've already invested this amount of man hours into installing this product and figuring out what it is. Yeah. And the actual, because it's not cheap, right? And we didn't get into that at all, right? Like the whole expense that's around some of these products, which is, I get, but yeah. But having those results actually go to the right people, right? Like a team might have, Ken at, GitHub, the guys that they have on their ProdSec team, obviously are going to be able to do something with that as opposed to, the initial
some network infrastructure guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And girls.
Their security team.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
Women.
No. I'm always trying to be cognizant of that.
And you should be. You're right. So should I.
Yeah. And so it's just a hard, like, jumping from vendor to vendor isn't necessarily going to save you as an organization, right? It's all about those people that are actually getting those results, whether it's consultants or internal people or whoever, and what they can do with it, as opposed to, how much is actually coming out of the product itself. But utilizing exactly what you've got here, like CX Flow and CX Audit to enable the people, that's great, right? That's where it becomes really effective, and we do see it. We do see it work. But
great.
Yeah. So I know I want to be cognizant of your time, Fef, right? Like you said, you have a pretty hard stop here. So, where can people reach out to you if they've got questions? Is there, are you active on Twitter or other places if they have follow-up questions?
So
they can hit you up on Slack.
Yeah. You can hit me up on Slack here on the Absolute AppSec for sure. Also, I don't participate too much in Twitter. I'm more of a lurker. I liked seeing Troy Hunt's post. I think it was this morning about that our current POTUS and his comment on hacking. I don't know if you saw that or not. It was really quite funny. But you can always also my email, right? mark.feferman@checkmarks.com. And of course, you can give my personal email as well. I don't mind. I love talking about really the SDLC in general, right? And look, I can say it like this: Checkmarks is a great solution. So is Fortify. So is any tool, but because it's really about how you use it and using it properly. So
cool.
Anyway.
Well, good. Because where we're all stuck at home for the foreseeable future, right? Like, we'll get with you and talk about bringing somebody else on to review CX Flow or CX Audit and some of the other things that you've got, because I think that would be interesting. Sounds like there's somebody listening that is interested as well. So we'll go from there. We'll reach out and figure out a time to do that. Any last minute thoughts then? What's wrong, Ken?
I just read the Trump quote.
Yep.
And I quote, "Nobody gets hacked. To get hacked, you need somebody with 197 IQ, and he needs about 15% of your password."
And if you remember reading an earlier one, right, his account got hacked because his password was "You're fired."
You're fired. Yeah.
You're fired. One.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's what it is now. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Now
with a capital Y.
Two.
Right. Well, this has been great, guys.
We didn't have enough time. Yeah,
well,
it's good.
I love that we get to catch up with people we don't normally get to catch up with, such as yourself on this podcast. It's probably the most enjoyable part. And thank you for your time, Mark.
Of course.
We appreciate it.
I want to give a shout out. I know that you guys mentioned him briefly. I have to say I've met so many amazing people here in this space. You guys included, certainly the Fishnet team, but folks like Jim Manico. I mean, great guy, super relevant in our space. it's amazing to me how many sharp people there are that are trying to work towards making this a safer world from an AppSec perspective. So
Totally.
I don't consider myself in that group. So
Oh, come on, Mark. Come on,
Mark, you are.
Yeah,
No.
you are, man.
but
You're just too humble.
well, I don't know about that. I'm just a single father with 2 kids. So
Man, speaking of which, your oldest has gotten super tall. I saw a picture and I'm like, oh my, and he looks just like, oh, it's crazy. It's so crazy. Like, it's crazy in a good way. That's a good thing.
yeah, well, we can have another discussion about that offline. So
Yeah.
anyway, but it was great
Cool.
talking to you guys. Really, I love catching up, and I hope to see you guys at a conference sometime soon that's in person.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Fingers
I hope
crossed.
so. And I'm going to try and make your online one, Midsummer's Night or whatever you guys are talking
Oh,
about.
yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Did we mention
We
that?
didn't even mention it this time. Midwinter's Nightcon is coming.
Good.
It will be December 16th, 17th. I think are the 2 dates.
2-day. It's bigger.
Yeah.
It's got a whole team now behind it. It's crazy. It's
Nice.
Yeah,
which we will name all of them and give big thank yous and all of that
Yep.
because they're amazing. And yeah, but it's awesome.
Yep.
Great.
So watch for the link. The registration link should be up within the next couple of weeks, and as well as speakers that we've invited. So it'll be a good time.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. We'll catch you all next week. And Mark, again, thanks for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Anything else, Ken?
Nope. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.